The wind howled outside as October's chill crept into the small town of Pine Hollow. Halloween was only a night away and the streets were quiet. Too quiet. Most people stayed indoors when the sun went down, as if the darkness itself carried an old whispered warning. But for Mia Carter, a college sophomore earning money as a babysitter, the night was just another job. She arrived at the Henderson residence at 8 p.m. sharp. The house sat at the edge of town, an old Victorian-style home with peeling paint and creaking shutters. The couple, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, were dressed for a Halloween gala, eager for a rare night out. "We'll be back around midnight," Mrs. Henderson said, handing Mia a list of emergency contacts. "The kids are already asleep upstairs. Just keep an eye on them and don't answer the door. We've had pranksters lately." "Got it," Mia smiled, though a shiver crawled up her spine. She had heard rumors about this house, about strange phone calls, figures in the yard, and things that moved at night. But she wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. The house was silent after the couple left. Mia made herself a cup of tea and settled on the living room couch, scrolling through her phone to pass the time. The hours dragged by slowly. At 9:30 the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Then the phone rang. Mia jumped, spilling a bit of tea on her jeans. Who would call the landline? The Hendersons hadn't mentioned expecting anyone. She hesitated before picking up. "Hello?" Static crackled on the other end, followed by heavy breathing. Then a deep, distorted voice spoke. "Check the children." Her heart stopped. "Who is this?" she demanded, but the line went dead. She stood frozen, staring at the receiver. Maybe it was a prank. The Halloween season brought out plenty of idiots. But still, she glanced up the stairs toward the children's rooms. Everything was silent. "Get a grip, Mia," she whispered to herself. "It's just a joke." At 9:45, the phone rang again. This time she answered with a shaky, "Hello? Why haven't you checked the children?" The voice hissed. A cold sweat broke out on her skin. "Who are you?" she shouted. But again, the line clicked dead. Now her instincts screamed that something was wrong. She grabbed the cordless phone and dialed 911. "Pine Hollow Police Department. What's your emergency?" "This is Mia Carter. I'm babysitting at 304 Ridge Lane. I keep getting strange calls and someone keeps telling me to check the children." "Stay calm, ma'am," the dispatcher said. "Do not go upstairs. Stay on the line. We're tracing the call right now." Her hands trembled. Every second felt like an hour. The house groaned as the wind pushed against the windows and the old wooden staircase loomed in the dim light. The phone rang again. "Ma'am," said the dispatcher quickly. "Do not answer it. We're tracing—" But Mia had already pressed the button. "Stop calling me," she shouted. The voice on the other end was slower this time, almost amused. "Too late. I'm already inside." The line went dead, her blood turned to ice. She dropped the phone and stumbled backward, her mind racing. Inside? No, that wasn't possible. She had locked the doors. She had checked them, hadn't she? The dispatcher's voice crackled from the phone she'd dropped. "Mia, get out of the house now. The call is coming from upstairs." Her heart nearly stopped. Upstairs, where the children were. She bolted for the front door but froze halfway there. She couldn't just leave the kids. Terrified, she turned toward the staircase, each step creaking louder than the last as she climbed. The hallway was dark. "Too dark. Mason." "Lily," she whispered. "It's Mia. Everything's okay." But everything was not okay. The children's bedroom door was slightly ajar, and she was sure she had closed it. She reached for it with a trembling hand and slowly pushed it open. The room was empty. The beds were cold. The windows wide open. Curtains flapped wildly in the wind, and then from the darkness behind her came the soft creak of a floorboard. She turned slowly, her breath caught in her throat. At the end of the hallway, just beyond the glow of the nightlight, stood a figure, tall, thin, wearing a mask that looked like a child's porcelain face. It tilted its head at her, as if studying her reaction. "Where are they?" Mia whispered. The figure took a step closer, and then another. Mia stumbled backward into the children's room, slamming the door and locking it. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Somewhere in the darkness of the hallway, slow, deliberate footsteps drew nearer. "Check the children," the voice whispered from the other side of the door. And then, silence. The only sound left was the wind and Mia's ragged breathing, but she knew one thing with chilling certainty. She was not alone in that house. The old Lombard house had been empty for nearly 20 years, abandoned after the mysterious disappearance of an entire family one Halloween night. Locals whispered about screams that echoed through the halls, lights that flickered when no one was inside, and windows that seemed to watch passers-by. Children dared each other to run up and touch the front door, but none ever had the courage to stay past sunset. For Daniel Price, a true crime blogger looking for a viral story, the house was perfect. His channel had been dying, and he needed something real, something terrifying to bring his audience back. So against every warning and town legend, he decided to spend one night inside the Lombard house and stream it live. "It's just a house," he said into his camera as he pushed open the rusted iron gate. "A house with a creepy story. Tonight, we find out if there's any truth to it." The front door groaned as he stepped inside. Dust coated the floor in a thick layer, and cobwebs hung like curtains from the ceiling. His flashlight beam swept across faded wallpaper, shattered picture frames, and furniture left exactly where it had been decades ago. It was as if the Lombard family had simply vanished mid-dinner. "Check this out," Daniel whispered, panning his camera to a child's toy car sitting in the middle of the hallway. Untouched for 20 years, and still here. He made his way through the first floor, narrating the history he'd pieced together. A father, mother, and 2 children vanished without a trace on Halloween night 2005. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just gone. The police report was thin, the case cold. The deeper Daniel went into the house, the heavier the air felt. The temperature dropped sharply and a strange, musty odor filled his lungs. He tried to ignore it, tried to convince himself it was just the smell of an old house. At 11:45 p.m., he set up his camera in the main living room and addressed his viewers. "All right, guys. Midnight is when the strange stuff supposedly happens. They say the house comes alive. Whispers, footsteps, doors slamming on their own. We'll see if there's anything to that." The minutes ticked by in silence. Daniel was starting to feel disappointed. Maybe it was just a story after all. Then, at exactly 12:01, the front door slammed shut on its own. The sudden noise echoed through the house like a gunshot. Daniel jumped to his feet, flashlight shaking. "Probably the wind," he muttered, though every door and window had been closed tight when he arrived. A moment later, a faint creak came from upstairs. "Hello?" He called out, his voice trembling. "Is anyone there?" Silence. He climbed the stairs, each step groaning beneath his weight. At the top, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors. His flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The darkness was absolute. "Okay, that's not funny," he whispered, smacking the flashlight until it flickered back on. That's when he saw it. Faint writing scrawled across the hallway wall in what looked like chalk. It hadn't been there when he arrived. "Leave." Daniel swallowed hard. "Nice try," he said, forcing a laugh. Real original, but the laughter died when something answered. "Leave." The voice was soft, childlike, close. Daniel spun around, shining his light in every direction. "Who's there?" No response. Only silence. Heart racing, he backed toward the stairs, but the house wasn't done. A door at the end of the hall creaked open on its own. Slowly, deliberately. Against his better judgment, Daniel approached. Inside was a child's bedroom, untouched for decades. A tiny bed with faded cartoon sheets, a dresser covered in dust, and on the floor, a small stuffed bear sitting upright facing the door. It hadn't been facing that way before. Daniel's breath caught. "Okay, I'm leaving." He turned and bolted down the hallway, but the stairs were gone. Where there had once been a staircase was now a solid wall of rotted wood and peeling wallpaper. "No, no, no," he whispered, slamming his hands against the wall. It was real, solid, impossible. The voice came again, now from everywhere. "Stay. With us." Daniel stumbled backward, panic clawing at his chest. His camera slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor, still streaming. Viewers watching online typed frantically, "Did you hear that? The writing moved!" "Is someone behind him?" A shadow moved at the end of the hallway, then another, and another. Shapes and faint, human-like, and stepped into view, surrounding him. Their faces were pale and hollow, their eyes dark pits of nothing. The tallest figure spoke. Its voice was soft but commanding. "You shouldn't have come here." Daniel tried to scream, but no sound came out. His flashlight flickered again, and died completely. The camera on the floor showed only darkness for the next hour. Then at 1:07 a.m., it cut out too. The next morning, police found the Lombard house empty. The front door was open. Daniel's camera was lying just inside, still recording. Of Daniel himself, there was no trace. The video went viral. Millions watched as a skeptic entered the most haunted house in Pine Hollow and never walked out. And now, every Halloween night, neighbors swear they hear a new voice whispering from the second floor. Leave. But it's always too late. Halloween night was supposed to be magical in the quiet suburb of Brookfield Heights, a night of costumes, candy, and laughter echoing through the streets. Every year, the residents decorated their lawns with fake tombstones and glowing pumpkins. Every year, children roamed from door to door, filling their bags and their hearts with sweet delight. But this year, something was different. At exactly 7:42 p.m., 3 children, Lucas, Emily, and Jake, vanished without a trace. They were last seen heading toward the old Garrison house at the end of Willow Street, a place every kid knew they shouldn't go near. For decades, the Garrison property had been the town's darkest tale. Once a funeral home, it had closed abruptly after the owner, a man named Albert Garrison, was accused of conducting strange experiments on the dead. He vanished before he could be arrested, and the building was left to rot. Local legend said that every Halloween night, the dead woke up inside its walls. Most people dismissed the stories as superstition. Most people stayed far away. But kids loved dares. Come on, Jake had said earlier that evening, his ghost mask tilted to one side. Just one picture. If we post it, we'll be legends. Emily was nervous. They say people disappear there. That's the point, Lucas grinned. It's Halloween. It's supposed to be scary. That was the last anyone saw of them. When the children didn't return home by 9 p.m., panic swept through the neighborhood. Police searched the streets. Volunteers combed the nearby woods. But the trail ended at the rusted gates of the Garrison property. And that's where Detective Sarah Holt came in. Sarah had grown up in Brookfield Heights. She'd heard the stories too, about the whispers in the halls and the flickering lights that danced in the windows when no one was inside. But she didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in evidence, and she was going to find those kids. The house loomed over her as she stepped through the gate, flashlight in one hand and her service pistol in the other. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust and decay. Lucas? Emily? Jake? She called. No response. The floorboards groaned under her boots as she moved deeper inside. Old embalming tables sat beneath rotting sheets. Jars of unrecognizable things lined the walls. The deeper she went, the colder it became, and unnaturally cold. Then she heard it, a giggle. It was faint, distant, and childlike, but unmistakable. Hello? She called again, her voice tighter now. It's the police. You're safe. Come out. No one appeared. But the giggle came again, this time from upstairs. Sarah climbed the narrow staircase, her flashlight beam dancing across the walls. On the second floor, she found a long hallway lined with doors. All of them were shut except one, a door at the very end, slightly ajar. She approached slowly, hand tightening on her weapon. Kids? She whispered, nudging the door open. Inside was a nursery. Old toys were scattered across the floor. A rocking chair creaked gently in the corner, moving on its own. And painted on the far wall in what looked disturbingly like dried blood were 5 words. They never left this place. Her stomach turned. And then footsteps, light running footsteps down the hall. She spun around and caught a glimpse of something small darting into another room. Wait, she shouted, chasing after it. She burst into the next room. Wagon froze. 3 figures stood at the far end. Children, costumes torn and dirty. Their faces pale as chalk. Lucas, she whispered. Emily, Jake? They stared at her blankly. Their eyes were empty, too empty. Slowly, in perfect unison, they raised their hands and pointed behind her. A cold breath brushed against the back of her neck. Sarah turned. Standing inches away was a tall, skeletal figure in a blood-stained undertaker's suit. His eyes were hollow, his smile impossibly wide. In his hand was a rusted surgical instrument that dripped with something dark and wet. Welcome, he rasped. We've been waiting. Sarah fired, once, twice, 3 times. The bullets passed straight through him as if he were made of smoke. The children giggled in eerie harmony. Join us, they whispered. Join us forever. The room began to spin. The walls seemed to stretch and twist. Sarah stumbled back, gasping for breath. The last thing she saw before darkness swallowed her was the children's pale faces, smiling. The next morning, officers found the garrison house empty again. Sarah's flashlight lay just inside the door. Her radio was still on, crackling with static, but of the detective, Ned, and the 3 missing children, there was no sign. The town sealed the property for good, posting warnings and fences to keep people away. But every Halloween night, those fences are found open. Lights flicker inside the house, and neighbors swear they can hear the sound of children laughing drifting from the windows. It was a cold Halloween night when Nora Bennett finally decided to spend the evening alone. After a messy breakup and months of avoiding people, she wanted nothing more than a quiet night in. Just her, a cup of tea, and her favorite horror movies. Her friends had invited her to a party, but she'd politely declined. "I'll be fine," she told them. "Nothing ever happens here anyway." It was almost midnight when the first call came. The phone rang, sharp and sudden, breaking the silence of her cozy apartment. Nora glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Silence. "Hello? Anyone there?" she repeated. A faint breath echoed on the other end, soft and steady. Then a whisper, so quiet she almost thought she imagined it. "Did you lock the door?" The line went dead. Nora frowned. Probably a prank, she thought. Halloween always brought out the weirdos. Still, she double-checked the front door. Locked. Windows? Secured. She shook it off and returned to her movie. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time she answered without speaking. "Did you check the windows?" the voice whispered. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't told anyone she was checking the windows. She hadn't said a word. "Who is this?" she demanded. But the line was already dead. Nora's apartment felt colder now, the shadows longer, heavier. She turned on every light in the room and grabbed the nearest thing she could use as a weapon. A kitchen knife. It was probably nothing. A prank, maybe a wrong number. But still. The phone rang a third time. This time the voice was louder, more playful. "I can see you." Nora's blood ran cold. "Stop calling me," she shouted. "If you don't, I'm calling the police." The voice only laughed. A dry, rasping sound that made her skin crawl. Then the line went dead again. She called 911 immediately. "This is dispatch," a calm voice answered. "What's your emergency?" "Someone's harassing me," she said, her voice shaking. "They keep calling. They say they can see me. Are you alone in the apartment?" "Yes." "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "We're tracing the call now. Can you describe your location?" "Building 14, Rivergate Apartments. 3rd floor, Unit 307, there was a pause. Then the dispatcher's tone shifted slightly. "Ma'am, I need you to leave the apartment immediately." "What?" "Why, the call. It's coming from inside the building." Her breath caught. "What? Right now, ma'am." "Leave the apartment. Do not hang up and do not investigate. Officers are on the way." Nora's heart pounded in her chest. She grabbed her keys and phone and hurried to the door, but something stopped her cold. The chain lock was unlatched. She was certain she had latched it earlier. "Dispatch," she whispered. "I think they're already inside." "Do not speak loudly," the voice replied. "Find a way out, window, balcony, anything. Do not go toward the hallway." Nora turned slowly, knife trembling in her grip. The living room was empty. The kitchen was silent. But the air felt wrong, heavy, like someone else was breathing it, and then she saw it. Muddy footprints leading from the balcony door to the hallway. "Please hurry," she whispered. A floorboard creaked. Her breath hitched. The sound had come from the bedroom. She crept toward it slowly, heart hammering in her ears. The door was slightly ajar, the darkness inside thick and impenetrable. She reached for the handle. Her fingers brushed the cold metal. And then, ring. The phone in her pocket buzzed violently, nearly making her drop it. Unknown number. Again, with trembling hands, she answered. "I told you not to look," the voice hissed. The bedroom door slammed shut. Nora screamed and stumbled back. The lights flickered violently, plunging the apartment into near darkness. From behind the door came a slow, deliberate dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. "Dispatch," she cried into the phone. "He's in here. He's in here." "Stay calm, ma'am. Officers are 2 minutes away." 2 minutes felt like forever. The dragging stopped. Silence pressed in from all sides. Nora backed toward the front door, eyes locked on the bedroom. Then where the handle turned, slowly, carefully. It opened, something stepped out. She couldn't see its face, only the outline of a man, tall and thin, his head tilted unnaturally to one side. In one hand he held her missing kitchen knife. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. "I told you," the voice whispered, no longer from the phone, but from the figure standing in her hallway. "I can see you." The last thing Nora remembered was the sound of splintering wood as the police broke down the door. They found the apartment empty. The balcony door was open, the curtains billowing in the wind. Nora Bennett was gone. No sign of struggle, no blood, no footprints. Just the phone, still connected to dispatch, lying on the floor, and at exactly midnight the phone rang once more. "Did you lock the door?" the voice asked. Every town has a story, a legend parents use to scare their children into behaving. In the sleepy town of Hallows End, that legend was the Pumpkin Man. The story was always the same. On Halloween night, if you stayed out past midnight, he would find you. With a carved pumpkin for a head and a body stitched from the clothes of his victims, he would rise from the cornfields to hunt those who disrespected the dead. Most people laughed it off as a ghost story, an old folk tale meant to keep kids indoors. But in the autumn of 1998, 5 teenagers decided to test the legend. Only one came back. 25 years later, that survivor, now Detective Mark Keller, still had nightmares about that night. He never spoke of what he saw. The town called it a tragic accident, but Mark knew better. And when children began vanishing again every Halloween, he knew the Pumpkin Man had returned. This Halloween night was different. Mark wasn't going to run. He was going to end it. The wind howled across the empty cornfield as Mark stepped out of his car, flashlight in hand. The air was cold and damp and the moon hung low, casting pale light over the endless rows of dead stalks. Somewhere in that darkness, something moved. "This is where it started," he muttered to himself, "and this is where it ends." At exactly 11:58 p.m., his radio crackled. "Detective Keller, we've got movement on the north edge." "Possible suspect, hold your position," he replied. "I'm going in." He pushed deeper into the field, the dry stalks whispering against his coat. Every rustle, every distant snap made his pulse quicken. Memories he'd spent decades burying clawed their way back. The screams of his friends, the flicker of candlelight in the darkness, and that face. That horrible carved face smiling at him from the shadows. A soft laugh drifted through the night. Not human. Not sane. "Who's there?" he called, his voice shaking. "Show yourself." Silence. Then another laugh, closer this time. Mark tightened his grip on his flashlight. "I'm not a kid anymore," he growled. "You're not scaring me." A faint orange glow flickered between the rows ahead. He moved toward it cautiously, heart pounding harder with every step. As he drew closer, the glow sharpened into the unmistakable shape of a jack-o'-lantern. Jagged smile, triangular eyes, a candle burning inside. It sat on the ground in the middle of the path, fresh and wet as if carved minutes ago. Mark's breath caught. The pumpkin hadn't been there before. He took a step back and froze. Another pumpkin appeared behind him. Then another. And another. Within seconds, dozens lined the narrow path, their grinning faces glowing in the dark. "What the hell?" he whispered. The laughter came again, this time all around him. And then he heard it. A dragging sound, heavy and slow, moving through the corn. Something was coming. Mark raised his weapon, flashlight beam darting wildly. "Come out," he shouted. The corn parted ahead. A figure stepped out. It was tall at nearly 7 feet. Its body a patchwork of torn clothing and burlap, its hands long and clawed. And where its head should have been, there was a pumpkin, not carved but grown, twisted and pulsing like something alive. Inside the jagged mouth, something moved. "Mark," it rasped. "You came back." Mark stumbled back a step. "You're not real. Do I look like a story to you?" It hissed, taking another step forward. He fired once, twice, 3 times. The bullets tore into the creature, but it didn't slow down. The Pumpkin Man reached out with one massive hand and swatted the gun away like a toy. "You left them," it whispered, voice dripping with hate. "You ran." While they screamed, Mark's knees buckled. It was true. He had run. All those years ago, when the others were taken, he had fled and never looked back. "Take me," he said, his voice breaking. "If that's what you want, just stop hurting them." The pumpkin man tilted its head, its jagged smile widening. "Oh, Mark, it was never about you." Something moved behind him. Mark turned, and his blood ran cold. Children, dozens of them, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing Halloween costumes stained with dirt and decay. Their faces were blank, their movements slow and unnatural, and each one held a tiny jack-o'-lantern glowing faintly from within. "They're mine now," the pumpkin man whispered. "And soon so will the others know." Mark stumbled backward, but the children closed in. Tiny hands reached for him, cold as death. He swung his flashlight wildly, shouting, begging, but the corn swallowed his cries. When officers arrived at dawn, all they found was his badge and a broken flashlight lying in the dirt. Mark Keller had vanished just like the others. The town declared it another Halloween tragedy. People left flowers at the edge of the field, and once again, the legend of the pumpkin man grew stronger. They say if you walk by the cornfield at midnight, you can still hear Mark calling for help and see the faint orange glow of jack-o'-lanterns moving between the rows. But if you're smart, you'll never stay long enough to find out. Every Halloween, the small town of Briar Hollow turned into a picture-perfect postcard. Cobblestone streets lined with glowing pumpkins, children laughing in costumes, and houses decked with skeletons and cobwebs. But hidden beneath the cheerful decorations was a story no one dared speak aloud, a story about a man they called the Candy Man. The legend said he appeared once every 10 years, always on Halloween night. He'd leave candy on doorsteps that no one remembered putting there, and anyone who ate it was never seen again. Of course, most people dismissed it as just a creepy story meant to scare kids. But when little Sophie Langford disappeared after eating a candy apple she swore came from the Candy Man, the town's fear returned. That was 5 years ago. And this Halloween, Eleanor Langford, Sophie's older sister, was determined to learn the truth. The night was cold and still as Eleanor walked down Maple Lane, a black cloak draped over her costume. It was nearly midnight and the streets were empty, the trick-or-treaters long gone, the laughter replaced by an uneasy silence. She clutched the small notebook she had filled with every detail she'd gathered over the years. Disappearances, witness statements, even grainy photos of a man in an old-fashioned candy seller's coat, spotted near the scenes. All the clues pointed to one location, the abandoned Rutherford confectionery on the edge of town. That's where she was headed now. The shop had been closed since the 1950s after its owner, Arthur Rutherford, vanished without a trace. Rumor had it he'd poisoned children with his sweets and was lynched by angry parents. No one knew for sure, but some said the Candy Man was his ghost, or worse, something that wore his face. Eleanor pushed open the door. It groaned loudly, echoing through the empty building. Dust floated in the beam of her flashlight. The air smelled faintly of sugar, old rotting sugar, and something metallic beneath it. "Hello?" she called softly. "Is anyone here?" Silence. She moved deeper inside, her heart pounding. The shelves were still lined with glass jars full of faded candy. Some were shattered on the floor, their contents melted into dark stains. At the far end of the shop was a heavy wooden door leading to the basement. Every instinct told her to turn back. Instead, she opened it. The stairs creaked as she descended into darkness. The air grew colder, thicker, as if the building itself was holding its breath. At the bottom, her flashlight flickered over something that made her blood run cold. Candy. Piles of it. Fresh. Brightly wrapped. Dozens of candy apples lined a table, each one glistening as if made that very day. And above the table, carved into the brick wall, were names. Dozens of them. All children. And near the bottom, Sophie Langford. Eleanor's hands shook. "Sophie," she whispered. A voice answered from the darkness. She was delicious. Her flashlight swung wildly, catching movement at the edge of the room. A figure stepped into the light, tall and thin, dressed in a striped candy maker's coat, a crooked top hat on his head. His face was pale and waxy, lips stretched into a smile far too wide, and his eyes, they were milky white like polished sugar. "Looking for your sister?" he asked, his voice sing-song and cheerful. "Such a sweet little thing. So much life left in her. Who are you?" Eleanor demanded, backing away. He bowed. "Arthur Rutherford, but you can call me the Candy Man. This is insane," she hissed. "You're supposed to be dead." "Oh, I am," he said with a grin. But death is just another recipe, and I've perfected it. He took a step closer. She stumbled back, hitting the wall. You took her, she whispered. Where is she? He tilted his head. All around you. Eleanor's stomach turned. She looked again at the jars on the shelves and saw something she hadn't noticed before. Tiny teeth, bits of fabric, human hair suspended in the sugary mixture. She gagged, stumbling away. You're a monster, he smiled wider. No, my dear. I am a tradition. And tonight you've come just in time to join your sister. He lunged. Eleanor screamed and swung her flashlight, smashing it into his face. He staggered back, laughing. What a high, manic sound. She bolted up the stairs, her heart thundering in her chest, but the door at the top slammed shut before she reached it. Leaving so soon? His voice echoed from below. You haven't even tried my newest creation. The candy smell grew stronger, choking her. Shadows twisted across the walls, forming faces, children's faces, screaming silently. And then from the darkness she heard it, Sis. Help me. It was Sophie's voice. Eleanor turned. At the bottom of the stairs she saw her sister, or what was left of her. A pale figure with hollow eyes and sugar-crusted lips, reaching out a trembling hand. Stay, Sophie whispered. It's sweet here. Eleanor screamed, and the darkness swallowed her whole. The next morning, the Rutherford confectionery was empty again. The police found Eleanor's notebook on the floor, but there was no sign of her. Another Langford gone, and that Halloween night, every doorstep in Briar Hollow had the same thing waiting, a single, perfectly wrapped candy apple. Most people threw theirs away, but some couldn't resist just one bite. Every Halloween, children are told the same warning: don't stay up too late. Don't wander alone. And whatever you do, don't look under the bed. Most laugh it off as silly advice, an old superstition passed down by nervous parents. But in the small town of Ashcroft, that warning wasn't a joke. It was a survival rule, and breaking it meant vanishing without a trace. The disappearances began long before anyone kept records. A missing child here, a vanished pet there, always around Halloween. Authorities blamed runaways, wild animals, or accidents, but the locals knew better. They spoke in whispers of the crawler, a shadow that lived beneath beds and waited patiently for the curious or the careless to peek beneath the covers. For Olivia James, those whispers were nothing more than childish nonsense. At 17, she had outgrown bedtime stories and monsters. She was too old to believe in the dark, until the night her little brother Ethan disappeared. It happened on Halloween. Their parents had gone out for a late dinner, leaving Olivia in charge. Ethan was supposed to be asleep by 9. When she checked his room at midnight, the window was locked, the door was closed, and his bed was empty. Only his favorite toy truck remained on the floor. The police searched for weeks. There was no sign of forced entry, no footprints, no leads. It was as if Ethan had simply ceased to exist. But Olivia refused to give up, and when she found an old town record describing a creature that pulled children into the dark beneath the bed, she decided to test the legend herself. This Halloween, she would stay awake. And she would look. The house was silent that night. Outside, wind howled through the trees, scattering dry leaves across the porch. Olivia sat in Ethan's room, the lights off, a flashlight clutched tightly in her hand. Midnight crept closer. At 11:58, she heard it, a faint scratching beneath the floorboards, slow, rhythmic, like nails dragging against wood. Her heart thudded. Ethan? She whispered. The scratching stopped. She held her breath. The silence stretched on until she began to think she'd imagined it. Then creak. The bed above her shifted slightly, though no one was on it. Olivia swallowed hard. I'm not afraid of you, she whispered into the dark. But she was. Every instinct screamed for her to leave the room, to run and never come back. Instead, she dropped to her knees and lowered herself to the floor. Her flashlight trembled in her hand as she turned it toward the gap beneath the bed. At first, there was nothing, just dust and shadows. Then something moved. 2 eyes stared back at her. They weren't human. They glowed faintly, like coals in a dying fire, and below them, a grin. A mouth stretched impossibly wide, filled with teeth too sharp and too many. Olivia, a voice whispered. She gasped and stumbled back. Ethan? The thing laughed, a sound like cracking wood and hissing steam. Ethan's here, it whispered. We're all here. The bed lifted slightly, as if something enormous was pressing against the underside. Olivia scrambled to her feet and backed toward the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. It was locked from the outside. The scratching began again, louder now, circling the room beneath the floor. And then, hands, dozens of them, small, pale, and bony, reaching out from under the bed, clawing at the air. "Come play," the voice hissed. "It's warm down here." "No," Olivia shouted, grabbing the nearest thing she could, a metal lamp, and smashing it against the floor. "Give me my brother!" The laughter grew louder, echoing inside her head. The bed rose higher, and from beneath it a shape began to crawl out. It was long and thin, its limbs bending the wrong way, its skin stretched tight over a frame that seemed to shift and twist. Its face was featureless, except for the eyes and that smile. Olivia screamed and swung the lamp again, but the creature moved too fast. Its hand shot out, wrapping around her ankle with a grip like iron. She kicked and thrashed, but it only laughed, dragging her toward the darkness beneath the bed. "Stop fighting," it whispered. He stopped fighting too. The last thing Olivia saw before she was pulled into the darkness was Ethan's toy truck, lying forgotten on the floor. The next morning, her parents found her room empty. The window was locked. The door was closed. No sign of a struggle. The only thing out of place was the bed, shifted slightly from the wall, and a new toy truck sitting neatly beside the old one. The police called it another disappearance. The town called it the work of the crawler. And on Halloween night, every parent in Ashcroft repeated the same warning to their children: don't stay up too late. Don't wander alone. And whatever you do, don't look under the bed, because once you see it, it sees you too.